Long before the white shirt of Real Madrid, before the packed stadiums in Spain, before millions began copying his celebration with his arms stretched wide, Jude Bellingham was simply a boy growing up in the West Midlands of England, surrounded by a family that understood football. Today, it is difficult to look at Jude without seeing the enormous matches, the pressure of playing for England, and the expectations that follow him. We imagine that everyone must have known that the road was waiting for him. But real life is rarely that simple. Jude was born in Stourbridge in June 2003. His father Mark worked as a police officer and was a prolific goalscorer in non-league football. His mother Denise would become one of the most important figures in his journey, and his younger brother Job was growing up with him. He joined Birmingham City's academy as a child, entering a system filled with hope but very few guarantees. Coaches saw a midfielder capable of understanding different areas of the game, and the number 22 became connected to his development. In August 2019, Birmingham City selected Jude for the first team. He was 16 years and 38 days old. 16 is still 16. He was entering professional matches against grown men in the Championship, one of the most demanding leagues in England. Against Stoke City, Jude scored the winning goal, becoming the youngest goalscorer in the club's history. People were watching him now. Major clubs were watching him. And with attention came a different kind of pressure. Manchester United had shown serious interest. Borussia Dortmund wanted him. The biggest decision of his young life was approaching. Germany offered Jude a place where his development might continue through actual matches. But it meant leaving England at 17 years old. Denise moved with Jude to Germany, while Mark remained with Job in England. Success had created a situation where the family had to split. At Borussia Dortmund, he was entering another country, another league, and a club filled with talented players from around the world. Jude had already entered professional football at 16. Now, at 17, he had left his country. The world was beginning to expect more. Eventually, the boy from Birmingham would find himself carrying expectations that have broken players far older than him. But before Madrid, Germany would teach him one of the hardest lessons of his life. Because sometimes you can give everything to a dream, get close enough to believe it is yours, and still watch it disappear. Because sometimes you can give everything to a dream, get close enough to believe it is finally yours, and still watch it disappear. But Jude Bellingham had not learned that lesson yet. When he arrived at Borussia Dortmund in the summer of 2020, he was 17 years old. Almost everything around him was changing at once. A new country, a new league, new teammates, and a level of football that would expose every weakness. Birmingham had just sold one of the most talented young players in England, and people naturally wanted to know whether Jude had made the right decision. He could have remained in England. Manchester United had been seriously interested, but Jude and his family had looked carefully at Dortmund. They saw a place where young players were trusted to play. For a 17-year-old, that mattered. He wanted to be inside professional football. In September 2020, during his competitive debut, Jude scored against MSV Duisburg. He became Borussia Dortmund's youngest goalscorer in a competitive match. Records have a way of making a teenager's rise look almost effortless, as if history is simply opening doors in the correct order. But records only tell us what happened. They do not tell us what a person had to become in order to keep moving when the attention grew. Jude was now playing alongside footballers he had previously watched from a distance. Dortmund were competing in the Champions League. Mistakes that might once have been part of development could now happen in matches watched around the world. And Jude made mistakes. He was 17. Some players become smaller after a mistake. They begin choosing the safest pass. Jude seemed to have a different instinct. He continued asking for the ball. Season by season, the club gave him more responsibility. He became more vocal. The teenager who left Birmingham was now a premier European midfielder. Denise was with him in Germany, helping create stability. Jude has spoken about her as a central figure in helping him remain grounded. Family occupies a different space. They remember you without the uniform. They knew your personality before journalists began describing it. By the 2022-23 season, Jude was no longer treated like a young player. At 19 years old, he wore the captain's armband for Borussia Dortmund. That season, Dortmund began moving towards something the club had waited years to experience. The title race against Bayern Munich remained alive. By the final day of the season, everything was in their hands. Beat Mainz at home, and Borussia Dortmund would be champions of Germany. Jude had been one of their most important players, but a knee injury had become a problem. On the final day, he was not able to start. The match began, and the story Dortmund had imagined started falling apart. Mainz scored, then they scored again. The stadium fell into shock. The final whistle came. The title was lost on goal difference. Jude stood with his teammates, and the pain was visible everywhere. This was different. Dortmund had been close enough to prepare for joy. It is not simply that you failed. You believed you already had it. Jude did not know that Real Madrid was about to become his home. He did not know how quickly Spain would fall in love with him. Real Madrid wanted him. The club does not simply ask whether you are talented. It asks whether you can live with expectation every day. Inside the family, he was still Jude. Perhaps that helped when he walked into the Santiago Bernabeu carrying the number 5 once worn by Zidane. Then the season began. Jude started scoring. Important goals. Late goals. Goals that turned uncertainty into victory. The Bernabeu stood for him. Then came El Clásico. Jude, playing his first league Clásico, scored from distance. Later, with the match almost over, he scored again. Jude opened his arms. The image traveled around the world. A 20-year-old Englishman standing in Spain as if the pressure had never frightened him. Maybe the real story was that Jude had already learned what it felt like to lose. Dortmund had taught him that moments do not wait. What the world had not yet seen was how quickly that same confidence could become a target. Playing for your nation is a different weight. One can make you a star. The other can make you responsible for millions of people's heartbreak. But Jude Bellingham continues to step forward. For most footballers, club football is where a career is built. International football is where something more personal begins. A club can become home. Supporters can love a player deeply, but playing for your country reaches into a different part of a person. The shirt carries childhood memories, family memories, tournaments watched before you were old enough to imagine yourself inside them. It carries the voices of people who rearrange their lives to watch their country play. For an English player, that weight has a particular history. England has spent decades remembering 1966. Every generation arrives with new names and new hope. The photographs change. The players change. But eventually, when a major tournament begins, the same question returns. Could this finally be the team? Jude Bellingham grew up inside that history. By the time he joined the senior team, he was already familiar with expectation. He played professional football at 16, moved to Germany at 17, and joined Real Madrid at 20. Pressure followed him everywhere. But England was different. At Real Madrid, Jude represented a football club. With England, he represented home. He made his senior England debut in 2020, still 17, and soon became the youngest English player at a European championship. Then came the World Cup in Qatar. Jude was 19. England opened against Iran, and Jude scored. His first goal for the senior national team. For people watching, the rise seemed impossible to slow down. Birmingham, Germany, international football, nothing appeared to overwhelm him. England eventually lost to France in the quarterfinals. Another tournament ended. Another England team returned home. Football has a way of teaching players not to trust unlimited time. Injuries happen. Form changes. There is never a guarantee you will be there. By 2024, Jude's life had changed. He had won major trophies in Madrid and become one of the most recognizable footballers in the world. This is the strange consequence of becoming extraordinary. People stop allowing you to be ordinary. A quiet match becomes a concern. The better you become, the less space people leave for the parts of you that remain human. England won their opening match against Serbia, and Jude scored. For a moment, everything fit the story people had imagined. But as the tournament continued, the mood changed. Performances were criticized. Jude was no longer a teenager. He was the face of the team. Praise becomes responsibility. Millions of people wanted something. They believed this group could finally end the years of disappointment. This is one of the hardest parts of representing a country. The people criticizing you are often the same people who desperately want you to succeed. At Euro 2024, England came dangerously close to elimination against Slovakia. They were seconds away from going home. A long throw came in. Jude was there. With his back to goal, he lifted himself and attempted an overhead kick. The ball went in. Everything exploded. The criticism, the fear, the frustration, gone. Jude had scored one of the most dramatic goals in England's history. It would be easy to say he doesn't feel pressure. But perhaps courage is being aware of the consequences and still allowing yourself to act. If he mistimed that movement, England were going home. He had no time to calculate how the world would react. He simply went. England moved past Switzerland and the Netherlands. They reached the European Championship final. Spain were waiting. Losing teaches you how to win, but it also teaches you exactly how much another loss can hurt. Jude knew. The final whistle came. Jude Bellingham had lost another major trophy when he was close enough to imagine lifting it. Jude was 21 years old. He had experienced moments some spend entire careers chasing, but also the cruel other side. After the tournament, the football calendar moved on. New matches, new headlines. There is very little time to sit with anything for long. Jude returned to Madrid. Success moves the line. If you dominate at 20, people expect you to dominate at 21. His body carried the consequences. His shoulder caused problems. The world no longer simply watched him, it interpreted him. Through all of this, he continued returning to his family. His mother keeps him grounded. His father was his football education. And then there is Job, his younger brother. Comparison is easy, but Job's journey belongs to Job. Jude's belongs to Jude. By 2026, the noise was enormous. The World Cup in North America arrived, 60 years since 1966. Could this finally be the team? Jude was 23. Nobody spoke about him as a young player anymore. Experience had arrived quickly. In the quarterfinal against Norway, England found themselves in trouble. Norway scored first. England needed a response. Jude scored. Then, in extra time, he scored again. 2 goals. A World Cup semifinal. Waiting on the other side was Argentina and Lionel Messi. For the football world, the story was irresistible. Legacy, history. The boy who became a professional at 16 was gone. Jude was carrying every version of himself that had come before. To understand why Jude Bellingham keeps walking toward pressure, we have to understand the people who taught him what mattered before pressure found him. Long before Jude Bellingham understood pressure, his family understood him. That may sound like a small difference, but perhaps it explains more about his journey than any goal or trophy ever could. The football world met Jude in stages. Birmingham supporters saw the teenager. Germany discovered the midfielder. Madrid discovered the star. England began placing its hopes on him. With every new chapter, another group formed an opinion about who Jude was and what he might become. His family never had to discover him. They already knew. Mark had watched his son grow up around football while understanding the game from his own years as a prolific non-league goalscorer. Denise had been beside Jude through the enormous changes that came with leaving England and later moving to Spain. Job had grown up simply as Jude's younger brother, long before the surname Bellingham became familiar to millions of people. There is a kind of safety in being known before you are successful. The world usually meets people after something remarkable has happened. After the first goal, the first great season, the transfer. Confident, talented, difficult, brilliant, arrogant, mature, emotional. Words begin following the person from stadium to stadium. Family carries older memories. It simply means there are people whose understanding of you began before the performance did. For Jude, that connection has remained visible. When he moved to Madrid, Denise was there, helping him settle into another extraordinary chapter. Jude even spoke about some of it with humor. The ordinary relationship between a young man and his mother continuing inside an extraordinary life. At 16, strangers were already discussing his future. At 17, his transfer was international news. At 19, he was captaining Borussia Dortmund. Before 22, he experienced a Bundesliga title disappearing on the final day and a European Championship final ending in defeat. Most people are given time to become adults privately. Jude became one publicly. Every stage was watched. Maybe that is because family remind us that our lives are larger than the moment we are currently surviving. A stadium can make one person feel like the center of the world. Then you speak to someone who remembers you at 8 years old. Football has a way of making everything feel permanent. It isn't. The applause ends. The criticism moves to someone else. Jude is still only 23 years old. There is an assumption that he has already become whatever he is going to be. He hasn't. Right now, England are standing in front of Argentina, a World Cup semi-final. Lionel Messi on the other side, Messi against Bellingham, the legend and the young star. But Jude's journey deserves something more human than that. Jude knows what it feels like to stand close to a trophy and leave without it. He knows the silence that follows. And still, when England needed someone, he stepped into the match. He scored once. Then again, courage becomes far more meaningful when fear is allowed to exist. Jude knows you can play an extraordinary season and lose. Maybe that is maturity. Not believing everything will work out. Understanding that it might not. And caring anyway. Most of us will never walk into the Bernabeu wearing number 5, but everyone learns what it feels like to try again. Jude Bellingham's story is still being written. Maybe he will become one of the greatest English players. Time will decide. Maybe that is why the image of him standing with his arms open feels so powerful. Growing up is not the moment when fear disappears. It is learning to carry what happened without allowing it to decide what you do next. Step forward, without knowing. Life rarely gives us certainty before asking us to be brave. If you love football, remember the person behind the shirt. There is always a family. There is always a beginning. If Jude's journey stayed with you, subscribe to Beyond Football. Long after the final whistle, there is always more to the story.